Chapter 6, Choosing Material and Developing the Act. Let's jump right into it today. Magic that pleases magicians is magic that pleases a narrow stratum of society, adolescents. For that's what we are, all of us. Your actual age is irrelevant. If you are reading this book, you're an adolescent at heart. We like figuring stuff out. Puzzles, oddities, and anomalies appeal to us and challenge us in agreeable ways. But lo, they're not like us. Those citizens sitting out there looking up at us expectantly, we have to conscientiously force ourselves to put aside our own predilections and prejudices and seek out those tricks that have wide appeal. Mind blowing or mind numbing. We all recognize that some tricks baffle more than others. Unless you rely totally on comedy, you want to choose the strongest, most powerful effects you can get your hands on. That may mean making the painful decision to jettison some of your favorite routines, which leads to one of the weirdest observations about our magical world. It's the phenomenon that occurs only at magic lectures. The guest speaker performs a trick and light applause ensues. Then he explains the method, a really cool method, and suddenly everyone snaps to attention and begins forming mental images of squeezing this great new effect into his act. Stop! Exclamation point. If the trick itself didn't grab you, that's it. Another exclamation point. A weak trick remains a weak trick, no matter how brilliant or devious the method. So unless you radically rework the effect into something superior, forget about it. Look elsewhere. Never perform a trick if your primary motivation, consciously or subconsciously, is the coolness of the method. That's all the tail wagging the dog. Always think about the effect on the audience first, and then consider whether the method leads to entertainment. Here's Darren Brown's take on this, as seen on his outstanding video for Magicians, The Devil's Picture Book. The host on the tape refers to the oil and water card trick as a classic in magic. Darren responds matter-of-factly, saying, "Magicians seem to like it." Then he adds, "Oil and water leaves me cold as a plot. It's an example of the cards doing something as opposed to the performer being something or communicating something." Darren and Eugene Berger and others as well encapsulated an endemic problem in magic, the performance of tricks that put the focus on the props rather than on the performer. I don't think he meant to be harsh, but sense, but in the broadest sense, magicians seem to like it, with the it being either the props or the cool method, is an indictment of our fraternity I am willing to make. I enjoy Tenyo's puzzle tricks, but I also recognize that everyone viewing, for example, the blue crystal, gives full credit for the mystery to the plastic thing, not the warm-blooded me. Yes, I know there are now full-blown routines for these props, which purport to return some of the glow to the magician, but I have yet to be convinced of their effectiveness. Whether performing a Tenyo trick for one person or a stage-filling illusion for thousands, given a choice between presenting a magical thing or a magical you, it should be clear which is better. You want all memories of your performance wrapped around you and your brilliant talent. They may later recall your dexterity, or your other skills, or your humor, but your overriding goal is to, as Darren says, be something or communicate something, something wonderful. The props and the methods are your slaves. Master them. Performance trumps trick. The trick or routine is just a fragment of the entertainment process, a small fragment. You probably don't want to hear that. You've spent a fortune on books, props, videos, and conventions, and perhaps even private lessons. You just know that one killer effect is all you need to turn you into a star. But it never works out that way. The trick is important, but performance trumps the trick every time. Want proof? Take a look at the amazing Criskin during his heyday on American TV, a period spanning the 1970s and 80s. He routinely used one of the simplest and, to my mind, least deceptive card forces known, commonly called crossing the cut, or the cross-cut force. It forces the top card using nothing more than time misdirection. Yet there he is, making miracles out of it. Or at least that's what you would have thought from the reaction to the TV talk show host. Or, how about Blaine biting a quarter? The trick part of that effect is just a step up from a department store magic trick, or the Johnson's products catalog. Yet Blaine sells it as if it's a miracle. On the other hand, any night a magic club meets you can see the latest, greatest, and cleverest techniques performed to new heights of boredom and ineptitude. Wonderful tricks stink if performed poorly. Simple tricks astound in the hands of a smart showman. Performance trumps trick every time. A weak trick can be elevated by a strong performance, never the other way around. Weak performances are little improved by the strength of the tricks. New tricks, old tricks. The familiar American greeting, "Hi, what's new?" invariably elicits the response, "Not much. What's new with you?" Except in a magic shop. Ask, "What's new?" there, and the dealer takes you seriously. He springs into action because we in the magic fraternity appear to be allergic to old tricks. How short-sighted of us. New certainly has its place, and our craft requires innovation to thrive. But never overlook a trick or routine merely because it's familiar to you. Your audience does not know what you know. Old in show business is better interpreted as tired and tested. Consider embracing the classics, but put your own spin on them. Hairy gags and routines live to ripe old age precisely because they work. And as entertainers, our mission is to show and tell things that connect with our audiences. That's more important than new. Naturally, not every old chestnut works for every performer in every situation. Use tried and tested routines and gags sparingly, and only those that comfortably fit your style. My tricks, your tricks. As for the argument that originality, that's a quagmire of scholarship, sloppy or intense, pride, ethics, and commercial interest. Your improvement is my theft, or vice versa. Here's what we know for sure. Little in any art form is truly original. Everyone builds upon the past. Understand, however, that if you pilfer a line or bit of business without permission, it is theft. And in many cases, that theft is unnecessary, because most performers are flattered when asked for permission to use a brief bit of their show. What you don't want to do, ever, is appropriate large chunks of another's act, not only for the reprehensible ethics such actions represent, but also because there's a strong likelihood that the stolen material, which looked so good in the original show, will flop when shoehorned into yours. In one of my PEA workshops, I said something that was subsequently quoted several times by others. I believe the average American will see a live performance of 0.5 Mentalist in his or her lifetime. I also believe the number is only slightly higher for professional close-up and platform magicians, meaning that most Americans will die without ever having seen one of us in the flesh! Exclamation point. So a bit of clear-headed pragmatism ought to seep into the discussions around what's completely original and what's not, and which line or bit is mine and which is yours. Here's a personal example. You probably know the now common tactic among mentalists in which the performer recites the alphabet or numbers so that he can pick up on some perceived tell using either mental sensitivity or physical observation. Weird as it may seem, I believe I'm the one who originated the tactic. It was developed for a routine I did at the first PEA convention back in the 1970s. Bob Cassidy picked it up from me with permission, and his influential performances were seen by many, and so it spread. I made my case about this to Max Maven, widely recognized as a leading magic and mentalist historian, and he wrote back, I'm quite comfortable saying that you warrant credit for establishing the premise within our field. Master mentalist Ross Johnson expressed a similar sentiment to me. So what do I do about the widespread theft of my technique? Nothing, because there's nothing to be gained. Gil Eagles, as I said in the dedication, taught me the magic of sharing. Truly, giving freely is usually a good thing. It helps you. It may take years for good karma to circle back to you, and yes, sometimes there is no payback ever. Other chunks of my act were borrowed without permission, and I admit it hurts when someone says to me, that was just like Mr. Blankety Blank did here last year, but over the course of a career, truly, it didn't have a negative impact on me. And despite the pain, don't let yourself become overwhelmed with indignation. Trust me, you will be far better off channeling your energy into moving your act and your business forward, not looking backward in anger. That gets you nowhere. Let's look at this hotly argued issue a bit further. Original sin. Among stand-up comics, stealing a line or bit of business from another comic is just slightly less egregious than murder. That high standard, however, clearly wavers in other performing arts. The Beatles freely admit that their signature high-pitched woo used in several of their early hits was an homage to Little Richard. Did they ask him for permission? Not that I know of. All blues and then rock and roll are riffed with standard chord progressions. And we like that because sometimes familiarity breeds contentment. But we recognize the sad fact that much of that music was directly inspired by black musicians, all who received little or no credit or compensation. In our field, it's almost impossible to be completely original. Within both magic and mentalism, we are working with a limited number of plot lines. Things appear or vanish. They move or float. We tell people what they are thinking. We restore broken things, etc. So no matter how valiantly you strive to separate yourself from the pack, invariably some parts will overlap with what others have done, or what others are doing. Regardless, you need to work toward originality. Over time, the dividends will be enormous. In sum, don't steal. When in doubt, leave it out. Whenever possible, ask permission. In any instructional videos or books you put out, strive to give full credit. Destination, astonishment. Now, unlike in the past, magicians can see before they buy. Even those living in a remote region can access online video clips of many tricks being performed, and seeing is almost always superior to reading an ad. Of course, in most cases, the dealer demo shows us the mere potential of the trick, but not always. I've seen several cases where the dealer, through no brilliant insight, manages to demonstrate a routine that rises above more practiced and elaborate presentations. The reason? The trick has been stripped to its bare essentials and ends up stronger. I saw a friend of mine, a highly advanced amateur, perform Dean Dill's stunning rope and ring penetration, Dean's box. He preceded it with a brief discussion of the history of spirit cabinets and related topics. It was a good, solid presentation, yet it failed to ignite the sparks he expected. This trick, after all, is an astonishing mystery that, unless they know the specific principle involved, badly fools most magicians. Sometimes later, I saw a video demo of this trick, and I can tell you, the dealer made it much more powerful by simply pointing out the impossibility of what he was about to do, and then doing it. I wrote that before magic demo videos evolved into mini movies, replete with dramatic music, gorgeous people, and strategic editing. Lots and lots of editing. Nevertheless, the premise still stands. The dealer headed straight for the astonishment reaction and got it, while the intelligent amateur sidetracked us with less than riveting information. A brief digression. The raging controversy over the value of learning magic from books versus videos is a waste of ink and trees. It's like asking, which is better, a knife or a fork? Both are useful tools in delivering balanced nutrition, and your intake of magic information ought to be similarly balanced between books and videos. Videos show you the desired result. Books provide the details and rationale. End of the digression. Strong, stronger, strongest. The average magician knows hundreds, maybe thousands of tricks. Your audience, sorry to say, may not have time to see them all. If you're booked to perform for a specific amount of minutes, you've really got to cut back. So, in limited time, it makes no sense to display anything less than your A material. Fortunately, there's an efficient way to decide which material stays and which gets booted. Watch your audience. If you don't feel you can perform and observe at the same time, ask a trusted friend to do it for you. Specifically, ask a friend to pay more attention to the audience than to you, to take mental or actual notes about which tricks garner strong reactions and which result in wondering eyes and whispered asides. Once you have a strong act, break in new material gingerly and rarely. Keep only the killer routines and the funniest bits of business. And please refrain from using sucker tricks. They've become tiresome even to the casual magic fan, and they are rarely worth the feeling of resentment, however slight, that they engender. The same can be said for any trick where the magician succeeds and the spectator doesn't. We like them more than the public does, which is why many performers who do bank night routines now have figured out ways to reduce or eliminate the sting of loss. Props. Get real! Exclamation point. The days of props that have no counterpart in real life props that exist solely for a magic act are numbered. With all the great tricks available to you, it's just dumb to use any contrivance or prop that screams, "This trick happens here!" Exclamation point. Blaine uses no overtly magic props. Griskin has, but rarely, and even in Copperfield's mega show stage show, you see large amounts of recognizable objects: motorcycles, giant industrial fans, couches, exploding buildings, and lots of innocent looking scaffolding. Recognizable objects, whether for close up or stage, will always connect more efficiently with an audience's psyche than a three-sided screen adorned with colorful Chinese characters. Blow up your botania, deep six your dove pan, and trash your tearaway box. Exposure? Indecent? Some magicians, especially over the past few years, steer away from choosing material that has been exposed on television. From my perspective, yes, indiscriminate exposure is a bad thing, and 13-year-old teachers on YouTube and the mass morons on television are very bad. Mentalists, by the implied nature of their extraordinary demonstrations, stand to suffer the most from television exposure. But how many working performers, include mentalists, have ever been truly irreparably damaged by exposure? Not Uri Geller, who's been exposed thousands of times. Not David Blaine, not Criskin, not Mark Salem, and certainly not Duniger, even when his alleged methods were published on cereal boxes. Consider this. Today and every day, perhaps 100 performers will expose Slidini's paper balls over the head. The entire audience, with one notable exception, will see a very clever method for making it a wad of paper vanish. And this rampant exposure has been going on for decades! Exclamation point! Yet, 10 years from today, you can be certain that it will still be a surefire crowd pleaser. So let's plug leaks when and where we can, but never lose sight of the fact that it's the performer that makes the trick, not the other way around. Choose your routines because they're dynamite in your hands, and no one will give thought to the clowns behind the mask. Second, that emotion. Do you know why you vote for one political candidate over another? Or why you choose a particular automobile? You want to tell me you make your choices logically? But study after study shows us that people make decisions emotionally, then justify those decisions logically. The advertising industry is built on that thesis. And for further insight into this topic, I can recommend the book Brand Seduction: How Neuroscience Can Help Marketers Build Memorable Brands, written by Daryl Weber. Yes, my son. Emotions lubricate the gears of the entertainment experience. Without emotions, you're doing a lecture. Whenever possible, choose and develop routines that conjure emotions. Boris Wilde, the talented French magician, does an elementary pick a card, here's your card trick that grows into an emotional bit of theater. I won't give too much away except to say that he employs lush music and a loving gaze into the eyes of his female participant. The emotion of the moment, with its hint of amorous involvement, lifts this presentation above the prosaic and dry demonstrations we normally see with cards. What can you do to inject emotion into your material? Finding the hooks is not an easy task. You won't find them in the directions for the tricks you buy. But think about what sights and sounds affect you. Chances are good that they might affect others as well. With thought and imagination, you can overlay an emotional component upon many standard tricks. Is the key that moves in your hand from the house where your aunt died mysteriously, is that confetti or reminiscent of the first time you saw snow? You goose emotion reaction by using music, stories, a time when you were frightened, memories of a lost romance, happy or sad thoughts about pets, sights or sounds of a personal nature from your past or from the generic past of people in the audience. Audience perception. Back when I made most of my income from performing on the college circuit, I continually attended conferences of NACA, the National Association of Campus Activities. Sometimes I was chosen to appear as one of the showcase acts, and sometimes not. But either way, I made it a point to see many of the other performers. The variety of immensely talented people appearing on those shows repeatedly delighted and surprised me. The public has no clue about the vast number of unknown but talented people out there in the show business universe. After years of seeing this parade of future stars, I noticed that few tactics please audiences more than getting them involved. Audience participation. Done in almost any manner, it boosts a show to a higher level. Comedians, jugglers, certainly many music acts, and even mimes creatively concoct methods to turn spectators into participants. You should too. Not hokey bits that make adults feel as though they're at a kid's show, but quality pieces of business that get them feeling we're all in this together. I'm not referring here to situations that require one or more volunteers to join you on stage, which of course are fine. Rather, I want you to consider bits of business that involve people who remain seated and which at best engage the entire audience. You'll be in good company if you've ever caught a Rolling Stones concert. You saw Mick Jagger, a man who knows a thing or two about crowd control, flapping his head and scrawny arms and leading thousands in a sing along. You can't always get them to do what you want, but if you try, sometimes they will. Billy Joel never leaves out Piano Man, and he always stops playing while letting the whole audience sing a cappella. Same with Paul McCartney and Hey Jude. Working as a hypnotist and mentalist, I made frequent use of audience participation. They attempted to send or receive thoughts in mass, or were trained to applaud the hypnotized subjects on my cue. These tactics are powerful tools for pulling every audience member into the world you create on stage. That's why I suggest you look for those tricks and routines that provide the opportunity to bring your show out to the people looking at you. And even when you do use just a few people from the audience, be sure to involve spectators from all parts of the room. Don't go overboard. Reserve audience participation for special moments within your program. Warning: dangerous tricks. Proceed with caution. I may well be in the minority, but I hate tricks that put someone at risk. I find the idea of putting a volunteer's head in a guillotine offensive, no matter how uproarious the gags. We live in an imperfect world where surgeons, surrounded by other healthcare professionals, remove the healthy kidney, a world where the most brilliant engineers in the world cannot design a fail-safe space shuttle. Accidents happen. You just proved to me that the blade slices asunder the head of a cabbage. Now I'm supposed to be amused that the poor fellow's neck is in danger? Or is it no danger? What exactly am I supposed to think? Here's what I think, and what is going through the heads of at least some others in the audience. Yeah, it's funny, but what if? Accidents happen, and I feel only slightly less at ease about Russian roulette type routines where it's the performer who's risking death or serious injury while we watch. During the months I've been writing this book, I've learned of two performers severely injured their hands while attempting the covered knife spike effect. And in the years since, there have been many more stabbing accidents, including a couple where the spectator's hands were stabbed. Exclamation point! Can you not find equally compelling material that places no human in a dangerous situation? You can if you try. 4 case studies. Case study number 1. Ripped and restored. A while back, I could not attend a magic convention in New York, so I asked a friend to pick up something new and amazing for me. I'm not immune to the new and amazing bug. He returned with an excellent choice, a DVD of Yves de Mornay's Ripped and Restored from Mere Yeeted Magic. The effect: a card is freely selected, signed, torn in quarters, and then restored, one piece at a time. At the end, the card is handed out. Obviously, I won't tip anything here. I will tell you that it requires very little setup, the moves are not difficult, and it fools everyone. In short, it's an outstanding piece of magic, and if this plot appeals to you at all, you'd be foolish not to buy this DVD. Now, here's the reason I'm writing about this particular routine. The live performance shown on the DVD was shot a year or so earlier at a close-up session at a magic convention, Magic on Manhattan. As I watched the performance section of the video, I suddenly realized I had been there, in that very audience, watching as the video was shot. Exclamation point! Yet the routine, done live for me just a few meters, exclamation point, from my face had left me cold, unmoved, and uncaring. At the time, this book was not yet conceived, so I was truly just another spectator. Certainly, I had no idea how the card healed itself, but I didn't care. In the way it was presented, it was a puzzle, and solving the puzzle offered me no reward. Why should I tax my brain? The performance in many ways was typical of how tricks such as this are presented, and so it becomes useful to break it down into its component moments for closer analysis. Yves had a man in the second row just off the center aisle select a card. The man remained seated, and since I was seated 3 rows back, I immediately lost contact with the action. The still-seated man was asked to sign the card, and during the approximately 12-second signing process, Yves just stood center stage quietly waiting, during which time I was probably thinking, where am I going for dinner? The card was returned to Yves, and he tore it into quarters. Hands moved, covered the card for a split second, now and then, pieces restored. More hand movements, and the card became fully restored, all accompanied by a line of patter that basically told us what we were seeing. It lacked drama. It lacked theatrical focus. It lacked any emotional involvement. The patter added nothing interesting to the effect. Yet once I watched the DVD explanation, I remembered that the method, the handling, the subtleties, and the routining of this effect border on brilliant. So without doubt, this has the potential to be an extremely strong piece of magic. David Copperfield tore and restored a rare baseball card on one of his television specials. It was packed with emotional involvement. Let's see. Only a couple pages left. Every piece of magic we perform is a playlet, a little piece of theater. Accordingly, we have to consider exactly what we are trying to communicate with our words or actions. drama, farce, comedy, tragedy, spectacle. A playlet must have a climax, and for us, that's easy. It's the moment of the magic, but it also needs more an interesting exposition leading to the climax. The script for Yves' playlet said to me something interesting will happen, but you'll just have to sit quietly, pay close attention to what I'm doing, and you'll be rewarded with a surprise at the end. That's not enough! Exclamation point. Case study number 2. A version of a Larry Jennings Jack sandwich effect demonstrated by the late Daryl Eatson, a beloved and renowned close-up magician. This is another clip I first viewed on the L&L website, and it's a perfect example of magic for magicians. It's executed beautifully, and as cleanly as this method allows, yet for me, a few points would be deducted from the artistic merit score. The effect, the 2 one-eyed jacks are removed from the deck. A card is selected and returned to the pack, which is then shuffled. Daryl holds the 2 jacks in one hand, while the other hand holds the pack. As the cards from the pack are allowed to dribble from his hand to the table, Daryl stabs the jacks into the falling cards, separating them, and shows the face-down selected card sandwiched between the face-up jacks. Let's go over it, moment by moment. He ribbon spreads the cards on the table. Would you do me a small favor? Take any card from the pack. Would you do me a small favor? In the middle of a formal routine is an overly falsely friendly phrasing that has an undertone of condescension. Please place it back into the deck. That's a great spot. What's great about an adult putting a card on top of the half deck in Daryl's hand? Now, I'll shuffle the cards so even I don't know where it is. Okay, now assuming this is not the first trick of the day, and assuming this wasn't meant as a joke, it didn't come across that way, it's been established that Daryl knows his way around a deck of cards. The card is returned where Daryl says it should be placed, on top of the cards in his extended hand. Now I'll shuffle the cards so even I don't know where it is. How many intelligent onlookers will swallow that? 50%? 80%? Maybe 20%? It's guaranteed not to be as high as we might prefer. What was your card? The 3 of clubs? Ladies and gentlemen, the 3 of clubs! Exclamation point. Again, this is a good trick, and Daryl was one of our finest performers. But in the vast universe of trickdom, why choose a routine that requires you to handle the cards in this manner? Many sophisticated onlookers will place this on my hierarchy of mystery entertainment between puzzle and trick. They won't know what's going on, but they will know that Daryl handles the cards differently than they would if they tried to recreate the same plot. They won't know how he got the selected card between the jacks, and they may not even care because clearly he does something even so slightly out of the ordinary when the selected card is returned to the cards in his hand. If your goal is to entertain with magic, not with dexterity or flourishes or juggling, stick to the cleanest, strongest effects. Case study number 3. A doll trick steps up. Here's a trick that breaks some of my rules. It's a borrowed deck trick. Good. With lots of procedure. Not good. But it has redeeming qualities that merit attention. The instant download of Where It Has to Go by Rick Lax was released by Penguin Magic in the summer of 2018. The promo trailer does not show the full routine. Had I read its description in a book, I would have turned the page and never thought about it again. However, Rick performed it for me in a small group of pro magicians at a party a few weeks prior to the release, and it badly fooled. In an entertaining way, all of us. On the video download, Rick fully explains the steps to make the trick work. Then, when you think it's done, he comes back to tell you about a subtlety to make it better. Then he adds another, and another, and it is the totality of those little twists to a bare-bones plot that lift the trick to a higher realm. Clearly, he and his team shepherded this routine from its early stages through to what I saw at the party, polishing it again and again. They thought deeply about every step, what could go wrong, what could be improved, and importantly, how to boost the magic and entertainment content of what easily could be a very dry trick. It was a stark reminder. Developing the mechanics of a trick is only the first step. Exclamation point. The mastery of the how must be followed by understanding and conquering the why of a trick. Why should your audience care? Why are you doing this and not that? Why are you not getting the response you expected? We learned from the explanation video that Rick worked with several other magicians to hone his rather simple effect to achieve maximum impact. Clearly, collaborating during the early stages with folks you trust is a desirable habit. An extra recognition to Rick for his acknowledging those who helped him on this particular routine, along with credit for the thinking behind the trick. That was done at the end of the video, and surprisingly for me at least, even on the website following the sales pitch for the trick, it says, special thanks and credit to Justin Flem, Andrew Jack, Tejas France, Kyle and Misty Knight, Ed Marlowe, John Bannon, Ed Marlowe Automatic Placement, Pharaoh Notes, 1958, John Bannon, The 32nd Sense, Destination Zero, 2015. We need more of that kind of unambiguous crediting in magic. Case study number 4. A beginner learns a classic and teaches a lesson. Kathy Daly still serves as the vice president of my wealth management firm, Weber Asset Management. She's a woman with a hair-trigger sense of humor, and after working for me too damn long, a casual interest in magic. A few years back, prior to our December holiday office party, she asked me to teach her a trick to perform for our colleagues and their spouses. I chose the invisible deck. It's solid and it's sold in malls across America. So don't hinge me for exposing a classic. Between the dry-aged steaks and the cheesecake, she performed the trick, including all the hackneyed invisible deck gags to a good reaction. And per the normal script, when something amazing occurs, one of our group urged her to do that again! Exclamation point. Now, in mentoring her, my first and only magic student, I neglected to stress the dictum that my inner 12-year-old magician now silently bellowed. Never repeat a trick! Exclamation point. So in her innocence, she completely disregarded centuries of conjuring dogma and breathlessly complied. I was appalled, but the train had left the station. She dispensed with the invisible deck stick and simply put the cards below the table, requesting that a card be named, and showed that yes, that card now was reversed in the deck. Whoa! Exclamation point. The response was stronger than the first time. So naturally, yet another of my loyal staff demanded, "Let me name a card!" Exclamation point. No, no! Exclamation point. I called out over the din of the restaurant, but there was no stopping her now. She was feeling that which turned us on about magic. She was the center of attention, receiving accolades for accomplishing something unfathomable, and she liked the feeling. And so for a third and final time, she performed the effect, now stripped down to its absolute minimalist presentation and the reaction, rather than diminishing, grew. Why? Because the trick is pure. Name a card. Look, that card is the one card I turned face down in the deck. No handling, no suspicious moves. Everything Kathy did was exactly what she would do if she were to demonstrate this phenomenon for real. Her casual behavior with the cards blocked any suspicion about the deck. No one said, "Let me see those cards!" Exclamation point. There are a gazillion tricks out there. 90% are crap. That still leaves what's a gazillion divided by 10. A super tanker full of direct, powerful tricks. Go find them and banish everything else. In the financial world, as Kathy Daly can tell you, investors frequently want to hold on to a downtrodden stock until it gets back to the level they paid for it. But that stock has no memory, nor any emotional attachment to the investor. If it's worth $10,000 today, that's it. Where the investor must ask is the best place for that 10 grand going forward from today. Likewise, the magician must be cold-hearted about his material. Don't marry your stocks. Don't be foolishly fall in love with a trick. The investment in a stock or a trick either pays off or it doesn't. Don't allow your emotions to get in the way of clear-headed decisions about what's best for you. Start naked. My thinking about developing new material has evolved over the past few years. Let's assume you want to present a trick you bought or that you saw in a book or a video. I now recommend that you do a stripped down version, one that is exactly or almost exactly as performed by the developer of the trick. Here's the rationale. And as usual, it's based on having critically watched hundreds of performers. Every trick, even the easy to master tricks, requires specific steps, strategies, moves, words, etc. For the magic to happen, you have to be certain that all the stuff is done correctly. We've all had tricks fail, especially in the early days. That's why you need all your attention focused on the mechanics of a trick. The cute, funny, dramatic playlet you write for the routine undoubtedly sounds brilliant inside your head, and it may be. So, to ensure you don't forget your brilliant thoughts, write them down. But accept that it might fall flat. If that happens, was it the trick that sucked or the presentation? If you combine the two, you won't know. The biggest step any of us takes in anything is from 0 to 1. That step from thinking to doing is everything, and everything after the big leap is incremental. That's why I urge you to set your clever presentation aside for the first 3, or 10, or 20 times you perform a new routine. Let the mechanics of the trick solidify in your head and hands. Allow your movements and words to be shaped by the reactions of your audiences. At some point, you will feel completely at ease with the basic presentation. And it might be a short time. That's the time when you can start to adorn the routine with your personal style and cleverness. On a related note, art for art's sake. At MagiFest 2018, Ben Seidman stopped me in the corridor to ask my opinion about a question a young magician had asked him. The teen wanted to know how to add art to his card trick. Tough question, and the basic answer is see above, start naked. You are a magician. You know how to do magic tricks. When you consciously attempt to overlay art onto the trick, you turn yourself into a playwright or dramaticist. It's an admirable ambition, but do you have that very different and difficult skill set? Are you truly a reasonable, good playwright or a good creative writer? You may be, but why force the issue? Instead, present the best bare bones version of the trick you can muster, and then let any storyline or bits of business, artsy and fartsy, develop originally over time. Organically is the word here, not originally. The desire for art in your act is a worthy goal, but definitely not required for maximum entertainment. To illustrate this point, Matthew Furman is virtually unknown without the magic community, but he's one of the most commercially successful close-up magicians in the New York City area. I know his work because he's been hired several times by my friends and relatives with no input from me. When I first saw him out in the real world, I was taken aback by his minimalist work. No jokes, no patter or stories. He just does strong magic, non-stop, and he doesn't even get much applause. But they love him. Yet few knowledgeable magicians would see art in his work. So you can have art however you define it. You can have entertainment or both. Neither is required to achieve the other. Regardless, if you do the strongest version of any trick, the art is in the magic itself. The art of magic. Flight time. All the dogged practice in your home can never substitute for actual performing in front of a real audience. So get out there! Exclamation point. Offer free shows, work on your new material at senior citizen centers, libraries, charities, open mic nights, or anything you can stand in front of live people. My pal, magician, comedian Harrison Greenbaum does more than 600 shows a year. Some are free, some are only 10 minutes. But as he points out in his lecture, he uses every show as an opportunity to hone the act. His doggedness, I can attest, has paid off. And my good friend Eric Diddleman created his own show, Amaze Balls, in a dump of a venue just to get new material up on its feet in front of real audiences. Jerry Seinfeld told the New York Times 10/27/18, real comedians want to go on every single night. Is that how you feel about your magic? If not, why not? If you don't want to be in front of an audience as much as possible, please rethink your career decisions. Colin and the Cloud. We're down to this last little page here. Colin in the Cloud, mentalist Colin Cloud, as I write this, has been touring the world off and on with the illusionist for more than 4 years. During that time, because he has to, and because he wants to, he's developed new material. He's a brilliant innovator, but unlike the rest of us, he often is testing new stuff in front of 1,500 people! Exclamation point! Wisely, he's developed a support system to help the process. Specifically, he records his shows and then he uploads the videos to a private YouTube channel. The private link to that channel is then shared with the very small group of people he trusted to give them reliable, detailed, and honest feedback. This clever technique was not possible in the past. Now it is, and you should develop your own mini network of trusted advisors, people who may be anywhere in the world. And speaking of The Illusionist, I saw and enjoyed the show on Broadway twice in 1 week, despite the same stars, the same theater, the same music and lights. Some parts played stronger, and some weaker in the two iterations, which serves as a great reminder that when developing your act, don't be overly dejected if a new routine or line doesn't immediately land with the impact you expected. Unlike The Illusionist, most likely you'll be performing in a different venue with a very different audience each time, meaning that new bit might kill the next 10 times you do it. If you have faith in what you developed, and nurture it and give it a bit of time to hatch. Look homeward. Every year, new magic in the form of tricks, books, and videos comes hurtling at us in increasing speed. Is that good or bad? Answer, it's not good. To sum up this chapter on choosing material, stop! Exclamation point. Stop your treasure hunt, or is it a scavenger hunt, for your killer effect. Whether you bought this book or borrowed it, it's a good bet you're not a beginner in magic. Slow down. Breathe. Focus. If you've been into the mystery arts for even just a few years, your home undoubtedly holds enough books, lecture notes, tricks, and videos to provide a lifetime of fruitful study. You don't need to choose new material from the dealers. You need to rediscover the material that at some point in the past delights and excites you and compelled you to make the purchase. The time you devote to thinking about and then buying a new trick is time you are neglecting something you already own. The rush to accumulate new holds back the perfecting of old. Better to rediscover all the good ideas you have encountered during your travels through the magic world, and which have found a place in the notebook you keep for this purpose. You do keep a notebook, paper or electronic, don't you? Okay, we're going to go ahead and read Del Rey at the card table. This is the highlight at the end of the chapter, and we're going to close things out. So let's go ahead. A personal entertainment highlight. Del Rey at the card table. As with so many in our field, I tend to know of those compatriots who publish or invent, and little of those full-time performers who are out on the road earning a nice living. Somehow, the name Del Rey had escaped my attention, other than being a Florida town, Delray Beach, up the road from Boca Raton. That changed years ago when I performed inside a tent at an outdoor fair put on for employees of a major pharmaceutical company. After my stage show, I was told that there were fortune tellers and a magician in another tent, so I ambled over. There I saw a quiet, slightly stooped older man holding forth at a large wooden table. At first, he seemed to be just another card magician, but what I didn't realize was that I had wandered into the middle of a non-stop 4-hour set. Yes, he used cards, but he was doing card tricks I had never seen before. A mechanical bird and other small toy animals appeared and moved around. They were finding selected cards, and I quickly realized I had no idea how any of this was happening. Groups of people came over, thoroughly enjoyed his presentations, and then moved on. Many attractions were vying for their attention, but I stayed for at least an hour and didn't recall seeing any trick repeated. All the tricks were done with a playful, understated style that charmed every onlooker, none more so than me. I introduced myself during a rare quiet moment, and he was pleasant, but the flow of new, ready-to-be floored spectators never ceased, so I had no opportunity to converse in depth. If he took a break, I never saw it. He seemed to gather in new energy and enthusiasm from each new group, and he never showed the slightest sign of faltering. It was a remarkable display of showmanship, deft technical skills, stamina, and the pure joy of performing. In the years since that day, I learned that among large segments of the close up magic community, Del Rey is a legend, and that afternoon made it clear to me why. Del died not long after this book was originally published. I'm fortunate to have seen him work in the real world. Boom. Next section is performer. Let's close this out with a quick note. As you noticed, I didn't take any breaks. I didn't stop and divert anything because in this section, what I wanted to work on is staying on track because we were working on scripting and rehearsing, which is about staying with your script because we're not there yet. We can't ad lib. We can't go off the rails. We have to stay with it. No matter how much my brain wanted to sidetrack, I needed to stay focused. And so we'll see how that goes. So thank you, everybody. And remember, stay positive, stay active, and stay awesome. And hopefully, we see you in the next one. And don't forget to subscribe because it really does help out the channel. And check out this video just for you. Ta-da!